Okay, welcome back. This is part 3 of my series, and thank you for coming back and watching. My name is Christian. Alright, so now, in this video, part 3, we're going to look at some of the first red flags when it comes to a fitness influencer and nutrition. Alright? There's 7 red flags that I want to discuss. This will be a while, so take some notes. I would recommend you do that. And be patient, because it will take me a while. I have a lot of data to unpack here, so I'm sorry in advance if it takes a while. And again, I'm sorry if this is kind of a low quality video. I'm not a professional YouTuber. So, low quality, I apologize in advance. I'm doing the best I can. So, there are 7 red flags that I want to talk about when it comes to influencers and nutrition. If most of these red flags apply to an influencer, you probably should not listen to his or her nutritional advice. The 7 red flags are as follows. You might want to write these down. The first red flag is no credentials regarding nutrition. The second red flag is when an influencer demonizes healthy food. The third red flag is when the influencer demonizes processed food with no context or nuance. The fourth red flag is demonizing protein supplementation. By protein supplementation, I'm including protein bars, protein drinks, and protein powders. The fifth red flag is a don't eat this at all kind of approach regarding certain food. The sixth red flag is claiming that diet alone can fix a problem when diet cannot fix that problem. And 7, a history of lying and hypocrisy. For the 7th red flag, if the influencer has a history of lying or being a hypocrite, that tanks his or her credibility, and you probably shouldn't listen to him or her. Alright? And if you want to know who the heck am I to tell you anything, go to part 1 of the video to have an idea of who I am. And, like I said, I will put sources in the description for these videos. Okay, so I'm not making stuff up, okay? I am using real scientific data to make my arguments here. I'm not just making stuff up. Let's be clear on that. So, let's go into the first red flag. The first red flag that I want to discuss is whether an influencer has credentials regarding nutrition. So, if the influencer has no credential regarding nutrition, that tanks his or her credibility. Alright? Now, I know there's going to be somebody in the comment section saying, you're not educated on nutrition, you dummy. Fair enough. This does apply to me. I'll own that. But I did use scientific data. I use a whole script here. I did cite scientific data and studies to support my arguments. So I'm not just making stuff up out of nowhere. I am using real data to make my arguments here. So do consider that. And you also have to consider that Paul Saladino, Abbew, and Rios rarely, if ever, cite scientific data, which does hurt their credibility somewhat. And in Saladino's case, he blatantly cherry picks data, which is also wrong. And we'll talk about this later on. So, the first red flag I want to talk about is, does an influencer have credentials regarding nutrition? Now, Paul Saladino actually does have a credential regarding nutrition. So this red flag does not apply to him. Alright? Now, this red flag definitely applies to Abbew and Rios. With all the internet research I did, I could find no data at all that showed that Eddie and Mario had formal education regarding nutrition. They seem to have little to none from what I could gather. So this first red flag applies to Eddie and Mario. So, if a fitness influencer has no credentials regarding nutrition, that hurts his or her credibility already. And like I said, this red flag definitely applies to Mario and Eddie, given their relative lack of education on nutrition. The second red flag that I want to talk about is demonizing healthy food. And this is going to be a big one, so please be patient with me on this. All right, the second red flag, like I said, is where an influencer demonizes healthy food. If the influencer is saying something along the lines of, this is a healthy food, but don't eat it, that's a red flag. All right? So, let's look at Paul Saladino more specifically here, because this red flag definitely applies to him. Paul argues that people should not eat broccoli. All right? So Paul is of the opinion that broccoli is inherently unhealthy, and therefore you should not eat it. The only problem with Paul is that the science overwhelmingly disagrees with him on this. For example, let's look at this 2019 study published in the journal Clinical Nutrition. You can find these studies, by the way. All the studies will be in the description, so check them out. Anyway, this 2019 study looked at the eating habits of 88,000 adults. These adults were ages 45 to 74. And this 2019 study looked at these adults over a period of 16.9 years. What this study found was that people who ate higher amounts of broccoli had lower rates of cancer mortality, lower rates of heart disease, lower rates of cerebrovascular disease, and all-cause mortality, and lower rates of all-cause mortality. So, simply put, the more broccoli you ate, the less likely you were to die from cancer, the less likely you were to die from heart disease, and less likely you were to die from a stroke. That's pretty encouraging, don't you think? Now, let's look at a different study. This study was published in 2012. This 2012 study, published in the International Journal of Food Sciences and Nutrition, discovered that eating broccoli improved insulin resistance in type 2 diabetic patients. Simply put, if somebody has type 2 diabetes, he or she actually benefits from eating broccoli. So if you got type 2 diabetes right now, you listener, eating broccoli might help you out. Okay, that's good. Now, let's take a look at this 2021 Umbrella Review. This 2021 Umbrella Review looked at 27 meta-analyses. All right, this 2021 Umbrella Review found lots of things, really. First of all, this review found that consuming higher rates of broccoli correlated with reduced risk of all-cause mortality. Simply put, the more broccoli you eat, the lower the risk of all-cause death. That's good. The study also found that the more broccoli you ate, the lower risk you had of cancer. You eat more broccoli, you got less cancer. That's good. The study also found, this review I should say, also found that consuming higher rates of broccoli correlated with lower rates of depression. Now, I am not in any way saying that broccoli helps cure your depression outright, but it will help mitigate your depression to an extent. That's also good. Now, let's look at one more study. This was a 2011 cohort study. This 2011 cohort study was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. This study looked at the eating habits of check this, 134,000 Chinese adults. All right? So this 2011 study looked at 134,000 Chinese adults. These adults were between the ages of 40 and 74. This study found that the participants who ate more broccoli had lower rates of cardiovascular disease and lower rates of all-cause death. I can go on, but I think you get my point. All right, the more broccoli you eat, the more likely you are to suffer from depression. The more broccoli you ate, the less likely you were to die from all-cause mortality, less likely to die from strokes, less likely to die from heart disease and stuff like that. Broccoli is objectively good for you, and it helps you. It helps your health. All right, so Paul Saladino says broccoli is inherently unsafe to eat, yet the data overwhelmingly shows that broccoli is safe to eat and in fact helps your health. Now, the caveat to this is that some people cannot safely eat broccoli. Fair enough. If you are allergic to broccoli or if you can't eat it, don't eat it. Fine. But that's not most people. Most people can safely eat broccoli, and those people will benefit from eating broccoli. The data clearly shows this here. So, Paul Saladino demonizes broccoli as being blatantly unhealthy, yet the data overwhelmingly shows that broccoli is healthy for you. Now, this is a long video as it is, and I don't want to drag this out for too long, but another point I wanted to talk about was that Paul Saladino demonizes all vegetables as being unhealthy because they contain phytoalexins. I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I'm gonna put all these studies that show that phytoalexins are in fact healthy, and that therefore eating vegetables is in fact healthy. I'll put all those in the description, so check those out. So, long story short, this red flag of demonizing healthy food definitely applies to Paul Saladino. Because Paul goes around and says broccoli is not safe to eat, yet the data overwhelmingly shows that it's safe to eat. So that red flag completely applies to him. Now, let's look at Eddie Abbew, because this also applies to him as well. Again, I don't want to go down too far down the rabbit hole, because this is a long series as it is, but Eddie Abbew also demonizes healthy food, so this red flag applies to him too. More specifically, Eddie argues, let me pull this out here. Eddie argues that apples are sugar bombs and therefore are not healthy. Eddie argues that the only fruits that you should eat are berries. So Eddie has a don't eat apples kind of approach. Well, the data, again, blatantly disagrees with Eddie. Apples are healthy and science proves it. All right, this 2021 comprehensive review published in Nutrients found numerous things about apples. The 2021 comprehensive review found that eating more apples resulted in lower rates of lung cancer, lower rates of bladder cancer, and lower rates of breast cancer. Another thing it found was that one study, which came out of Italy, found that if you ate 3 or more apples per day, you were less likely to get pancreatic cancer. So you eat more apples, you're less likely to get cancer, according to these studies. That's very good. A 2021 article, which was published in the British Journal of Nutrition, looked at apple consumption in elderly women. This study found that the participants who ate more apples had lower rates of all-cause death and lower rates of cancer mortality. So eating more apples reduced the risk of all-cause death and reduced the risk of cancer mortality. That's very good. So I can go on, but you get my point. The data clearly shows that apples are safe to eat and they're healthy for you. So Eddie goes around and says apples are not healthy, but the data clearly shows that they are healthy and they're clearly beneficial for your health. Again, if you're allergic to apples and you can't safely eat them, don't eat them. But that's a small minority. The majority of people would benefit from eating apples, and according to the data, it's healthy to eat apples. So, the second red flag of demonizing healthy food definitely applies to Eddie as well. So, ending it here. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I'll put more stuff about Eddie Abbew and other stuff he says in the description, so check that out, and I'll see you in part 4. Thank you for watching.